Hello, I'm Ben Stepney. I am a partner in the employment team at Thompson Sand and Passmore, and today I'm joined by my colleague Jessica Wells, who's a solicitor in the employment team. There's been an important development recently in relation to holiday pay claims, particularly historic liability for employers. And wondering, Jess, if you could start by talking us through the basics of holiday pay and how it impacts on employers.
So under working time directives, an employee should be receiving 5.6 weeks of holiday throughout their employment and throughout the holiday year. Now that can be increased if an employer offers an additional amount to their employees, but that's the standard amount that most employees should be getting.
Right.
Now that can be in addition to other holiday rights that an employee can receive. So if they receive an overpayment to their typical working day, then that's something that they will be incorporated within that holiday pay entitlement. Now, employees can bring a claim for unpaid holiday sums, and for an example of that could potentially be where an employee is not paid any money in consideration of any overtime that they are spent and any overtime that they should be paid. Now that can include where that's been miscalculated by the employer, so they are entitled to bring a claim in relation to any underpayment because of that.
So Jess, I've seen a lot of stories in the national media in the last few weeks about a particular employment tribunal case concerning the holiday pay claim, concerning the police in Northern Ireland and the claimant Agnew. Can you tell us what that case was about, please?
Yeah, of course. So in this case, the police officers in question receive holiday pay on the basis of their basic pay rather than their normal pay. So it was a failure to take into account anything that they should be paid in addition to their basic pay. So as I mentioned, any additional contractual benefits that they might receive. Now, as well in that case, under typical and under previous employment legislation, an employee could bring a claim, but it had to be within 3 months of the last time that the holiday pay was miscalculated or not paid. Now, the latest legislation actually updates that and provides that an employee can bring a claim over the 3-month time limit that was previously in place, provided that there is the same error or the same issue relating to that holiday pay. So there's no longer a 3-month deadline in place. However, it has to be related to the same kind of issue, the same sort of miscalculation relating to that holiday pay.
So Jess, what are the implications of that case for employers then?
So the implication on employers is that they no longer can rely on that 3-month rule. They need to be careful and need to consider that employees can bring claims beyond that 3 month if they can show that there was the same subject matter relating to that error. So they need to be aware that they're paying correctly throughout the employee's employment with their company. They also need to be aware that any underpayments can potentially be quite costly. So for example, in the particular claim that you mentioned, over 3,000 police officers were affected and over 350 civil servants were affected. And that claim had a particular compensation sum of around 30 to 40 million pounds. So it can be very costly to employers. They need to pay attention to the fact that they need to be paying not only on their basic pay, but on an employee's normal pay.
So how can employers, particularly in England, protect themselves against the risk of the claims that you've identified?
So firstly, they need to, as I've said, be aware of that they're not paying just on an employee's basic pay, but they're also paying on their normal pay. So they need to make consideration to the fact that there might be additional contractual entitlements to the employee, whether receiving overtime or something like that. So that's something that they need to be making note of when they're making holiday payments and making entitlements relating to that holiday period. They also need to be aware that there is a 2-year time limit in relation to an employee bringing an unlawful deduction or non-payment of holiday payment. So they need to be aware of that figure. Now, as that claim re-emphasised and has brought into the employment sphere, that actually an employee now can bring a claim after the 3-month period as long as it is the same subject matter. So they need to be making sure that they're not making errors, and if they are, that they're remedying them as quickly as possible. And as I've said, that can be incredibly costly to an employer. So they're all things that both impact and can benefit an employee and an employer if it's carried out correctly and managed correctly.
Well, Jess has mentioned some big figures, and it sounds like there's more liability there for employers than there might have been previously. So if you think that the issues that Jess has spoken about regarding holiday pay might impact your organisation, then please do not hesitate to get in contact with the employment team at Thompson Stan and Passmore.